battle, through every heartbreak, every circumstance. I believe that you are my fortress, you are my portion, you are my hiding place. I believe you are the way, the truth, the life. I believe you are the way, the truth, the life. I believe through every blessing, through every promise, through every breath I take. I believe that you are provider, oh, and you are protector. You are the one I love. I believe you are the way, the truth, the life. I believe you are the way, the truth, the life. I believe you are. Is this a new horizon? And I'm set on you, and you meet me here today. The mercies that are new, so my fears and doubts, they can all come to, because they can't stay long when I'm here with you. It's a new horizon, I'm set on you, and you meet me here today. Mercies that are new, all my fears and doubts, they can all come to, because they can't stay long when I believe you are the way, the truth, the life. I believe you are the way, the truth, the life. I believe you are. I cast my mind to Calvary, where Jesus bled and died for me. I see his wounds, his hands, his feet, my Savior on that cursed tree. His body bound and drenched in tears, they laid him down in Joseph's tomb, the entrance sealed by heavy stone. Messiah still and all alone. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise his name forevermore. For in the last days we will sing your praise. Oh Lord our God. He shall return in robes of white, the blazing sun, it will pierce the night, and we will rise among the saints, my gaze transfixed on Jesus' face. He shall return in robes of white, the blazing sun, it shall pierce the night, and I will rise among the saints, my gaze transfixed on Jesus' face. Yeah. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise his name forevermore. For in last days we will sing your praise. Oh Lord our God. And for in last days we will sing your praise. Oh Lord our God. So Lord our God. Welcome, everyone, to another amazing, fantastic, incredible week of Fuse Live. Thank you for tuning in and joining us on YouTube. Hopefully you're just chatting away like crazy on the comments, which, if I'm correct, should be over here in this area. And hopefully your week is going very well. We're going to go into our next week of our series that we're in called Jesus Is. And I want for you to, if you have your Bibles, either your paper Bible or your digital Bible, turn to John chapter 14, because that's where we're going to be at tonight as we do some discussion about the next week of Jesus Is. I'm wondering, to start off, though, if you've ever been a part of a conversation that you didn't realize in the moment was as important as you realized it was later on. Here's what I mean by that. Have you ever had a conversation with someone and then after a bit of time you realize, well, that was actually more of an important conversation than I thought that was going to be. There was a a year or so ago, I was having a conversation with someone, and just, not really knowing what was going on or who this person was, just having a casual conversation. I was in a social gathering because we could stand closer than 6 feet apart during that time. And we were having a conversation, and the gentleman was very, very nice, very, very pleasant to talk to, was great at carrying conversation. And he had his wife with him, and another lady was there. And we were having some conversation, and we talked for 5 or 10 minutes, nothing incredibly important, but just a pleasant conversation. And as he walked away, I turned to my friend, and I said, "So who was that guy?" And my friend, he told me, he's like, "You didn't know who that was?" I was like, "No, I was just trying to be nice and have a conversation with him." He said, "Yeah, he owns a company here in this city." I was like, "Oh, cool, like his own business or what?" He's like, "Yeah, he owns his own business." I was like, "Oh, awesome." And my friend smiled from ear to ear. He said, "You really didn't know who that was, do you?" I was like, "No, why would I lie? I didn't know who that was." He said, "I want for you to do me a favor, get your phone out." And he said, "Google this name." So I Googled the gentleman's name, which, I think is okay to, that's stalking. That's an okay version of stalking, I think, if you're allowed to. And when I looked up his name, the first thing, when you search in Google, there's you can fill in a search, and then it will autofill what your search is. Well, I typed in his name, and before I could get to the last part of his last name, net worth came up as a suggested autofill. I was like, "Oh, that's weird." So I selected that, and it said his name, it said his company name, and it said that he was worth $1.8 billion. And I looked down from my phone, back up to my friend. I was like, "Is that right?" He said, "That's how I know you didn't know who you were talking to." And I was like, I just had a 10-minute conversation with a billionaire and had no idea who I was talking to. I don't know that I would have acted any different, but I look back and I'm like, I bet I looked like a moron. Well, the way I was talking to him and the way I was joking about everything, he's probably like, "Who's this guy?" But that's fine, because I've only ever seen him twice since then, and he didn't remember me, so it was okay. But John chapter 14 for week 2 of Jesus we are in the middle of a conversation that Jesus is having with his disciples that seems like just a normal conversation that they're having, but it actually means so much more. And truthfully, they're not going to recognize it until, much later on, the significance of the conversation that we're having. So let's get into John chapter 14, starting in verse 1. It says this. Actually, let me set this up. Jesus is having his last dinner with the disciples in John chapter 13 and 14. If you've been in church a while, you know it as the Last Supper, but this is the last time Jesus is going to eat a meal with all of his disciples together that we get before he dies. So they're having conversations, and Jesus realizes they're starting to panic with some things, and he has this conversation with them. So verse 1 of John chapter 14, it says this: "Don't let your heart be troubled. Believe in God." Now let me just take a second. Because after the news that each one of you got this past week about school being shut down for the rest of the year, and all of you have been hoping for the chance to get to go back, seniors have been hoping to get to go back to school and have those last few days of what it's like to be in school, and your spring sports have been canceled, and it's a lot going on. And if you don't catch anything else that I say for the rest of the night, can I just have you focus on this? On verse 1 of John chapter 14. Don't let your heart be troubled. Meaning, you're going to experience trouble, and you're going to encounter chaos and things, but don't let that trouble sink into your heart, into your belief, and into your faith. Jesus is looking around at his disciples, and he can tell that they're panicked, and he looks at them and he says, "Oh, don't let your heart be troubled." Let's keep reading. "Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many rooms. If not, I would have told you I am going away to prepare a place for you. If I go away and prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you to myself, so that where I am, you may be also. You know the way to where I'm going. In verse 5, Thomas, one of the disciples, looks at Jesus, and like a good disciple, he doesn't know what he's talking about, so he asks a question for clarification. He says this, Lord, Thomas said, we don't know where you're going. How can we know the way? Jesus is having a discussion. His disciple says, listen, all this is going to be okay. I'm going to go away. I'm going to disappear for a little bit. Where I'm going, he says in chapter 13, where I'm going, you can't follow me right now, but someday you'll be able to. And Thomas says, but we don't know the way that you're talking about. We don't know how to get to this Father's house, this eternity that you're talking about. We don't know the way to get there. And Jesus tells him in verse 6, he says this, Jesus told him, I'm the way, I'm the truth and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. If you know me, you will also know my Father. From now on, you do know him, and you've seen him. Now, this is a really big statement that Jesus makes. Actually, in the book of John, there are several I am fill-in-the-blank statements, much like our Jesus is statement from our sermon series that we've had. And Jesus makes a really bold claim here. So much so that when you talk about in the arena of religion, this statement right here is one that often gets brought up and sometimes gets a little dicey whenever we have conversations about religions. Because, as you probably know, Christianity isn't the only worldview or world religion that people ascribe to and believe in. There are many. And Jesus kind of changes things around here when he says this. He says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Jesus is saying, if you want to get to my Father's house, if you want to get to eternity with God, the only way to do that is to go through Jesus, because he is the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And we just take a second here, because often people, when you tell them that there's not a bunch of ways to get to God, it's only through Jesus, things can get a little tense. And most people will say, well, who do you say that you are to say that there's only one way? And my response would be, well, it's not, I didn't come up with that. Jesus came up with that. I didn't set those parameters. Jesus set those parameters. Well, isn't that a little closed-minded to think that way? And if you ever get that statement, here's something. I'll go ahead and put this next one up here, because I want for you to understand something, because here's what I would say is, yes, it maybe is closed-minded to think that way, but it's very open door that way. And here's what I mean by that. It might be closed-minded to think that there's only one way to get to heaven, but in fact, that one way to get to heaven is completely wide open for any person to be able to have access to. One of my favorite television shows to watch is called The Office. And I'm fortunately or unfortunately old enough to have had to suffer and watch the new episode and then wait a week to then watch the next new episode and then wait months as the seasons progress. Unfortunately, I had to do that. Fortunately for you, you just go on Netflix and just binge it, like 70 episodes in a day. Don't do that. I'm just saying, I don't know if you can do that or not. Don't try it. Anyway, it is my favorite cold open in The Office. And it starts with Pam walking past the camera, and Dwight winks and nods for the cameraman, and they go into this office area that's kind of tucked away from everybody. And he talks about how he did some safety training as it pertains to a fire, and how he used PowerPoint, and that was stupid. He should have never used PowerPoint. And so he puts some things in a trash can. He lights it with lighter fluid. He shims doors closed. He heats door handles. And then he sets something on fire in the office. And smoke starts rolling out. And then all chaos breaks loose. And people are climbing through the ceiling. Angela takes her cat and tries to throw it to Oscar, and it comes right back through the ceiling. Dwight is trying to get safety instructions to people. Michael is throwing chairs through the window. They're ramming the copier into the door. Kevin is raiding the vending machines in his moment of peril. And it is just all-out chaos. And here's why it's crazy and it's chaotic, because Dwight has closed off all of the doors, and he's made it to where no one can actually get out with this perceived like dangerous situation. And here's why I'm bringing that up. Because the truth is this, is that all of us, whether we realize it or not, spiritually go through those moments. In fact, the real honest truth is this, and I hope you'll lean in for a second and just hear what I have to say. The real honest truth is this, is that without any help from Jesus, we are literally all trapped in a room that none of us have any escape from, and that's called our sin. We don't have an out for that. In fact, all the potential ways that are out have been locked and closed and slammed shut. Except for here's the amazing part. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And he might be the only way. Not he might be, he is the only way. But he is wide open for everyone to be able to go through that one way. There's no bottleneck in the way being Jesus. It's like the threat of being trapped alive in a room on fire is essentially zero if one of the entire walls of the room is removed and you have free access to go outside. There's no threat in that. If you stay in there, there is. But if the door is wide open, then you have a chance to walk right through it and to be safe from what's going on. And Jesus looked at these people and he says, I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life. And no one comes to the Father except through me. And he's looking at them, and they're trying to figure out how they get to go where Jesus is going to go. And he looks at him and says, if you want to get there, you just have to go through me. Verse 7, if you know me, you will also know my Father. And I think for some of us, we get into this trap of like, yeah, I know what Jesus was talking about. And here's what I want for you to understand. I think we miss a lot of Jesus' things that we're saying because we think we know, but we really don't have any idea. Because if anybody was going to know what he was talking about, it would be the disciples who spent 3 years face to face with him, and they're still confused what he's talking about. He has to explain it to them. If you know Jesus, then you know God. If you know Jesus, you know the way to God, because you know God, because Jesus is God. Now, why does this matter? Like for you as a teenager sitting in your house listening to this, why does this matter? Why is this relevant to you? 'Cause there are so many beliefs that people hold on to about religion. And if eternity is a thing, if you spend somewhere or you stay in some condition for eternity, this matters because that means that you can have peace about what's going to come. You can have peace about where you're going to spend eternity at because of Jesus. I truly believe all of us will spend eternity somewhere. And it matters for us because we can put our faith in Jesus and can know where we get to spend that time frame out. We don't need to worry about if we did enough, if we were good enough, if we made up for enough of our mistakes, or if anything's going to come back to haunt us.
we know that through Jesus, at his forgiveness, he is the way. And I think for maybe someone watching right now, that could be the best thing you could ever get. It's to know that your sins aren't going to be held against you when you believe in Jesus, that you can have peace and comfort in Jesus being the way. And it matters also because if Jesus' claims are true, you go and put this up there, if Jesus' claims are true, then that means that God is accessible to you. Yeah, if Jesus' claims are true, you have access to God. God who created everything. Like, take a second, breathe in deep. Hopefully you don't cough because that means you might have a respiratory issue and that's not a good thing right now. But breathe in deep. Take a moment and what you forgot is your heart is beating. Take a second to feel your heart beating and to breathe in and to realize God created you. And everything when you stare out the window into nature and on the incredible days, God created all those things. And because of Jesus, you have access to God. Because when you know Jesus, you know God. So what's this mean for us? What's this mean for you? It has significance for both right now and for later. Like we talked about later, the significance is we get to have access to God for eternity. But for now, as your life is maybe chaotic and confusing or disappointing or frustrating, or maybe your life is great, it matters to us now because we get to know God now. We get to experience what Jesus talks about as life and life to the fullest. And here's how we do that. We do that by looking at Jesus. And I want for you to think about this. Jesus says, if you want to know God, you can know Jesus. And know Jesus as the way, the truth, and the life. We get to know God by looking at Jesus and seeing the way that he looked at people, the attitudes that he had, and the way that he loved. We get to know God by knowing Jesus, by listening to the truth that he taught while he was on the earth. In here. Yes, when you read this book, when you get to know who Jesus is, you get to know God. And finally, we get to know God because we know Jesus by experiencing the life that he has for us. The life that he wants for us. And the more we walk out and submit our lives to Jesus, the closer we become to God because we grow in our relationship, not our religion, like we talked about last week. So let me just ask for your consideration tonight. What does it look like for you to get to know Jesus as the way, the truth, and the life? If you've never decided for Jesus to be your way to get to heaven, to accept what he did on a cross on behalf of you, I would love for you to maybe just start a conversation with someone that you know, and maybe someone you know that follows Jesus, or if you want to hop on our Instagram @FuseFCC and just send us a message and start a conversation, we'd love for you to consider that and start maybe getting some answers for your questions. Or maybe for some of you, the knowing Jesus as the way, the truth, and the life is to go, how do my ways line up to his? How does the truth that I live my life by line up with his truth? And how does my life compare and line up to the life that Jesus wants for us? Maybe you'll consider that tonight. Now, last week I told you that you wanted to make sure that you tuned in this week. And we have something pretty special. Actually, I think it's going to be pretty cool. Most of you have seen on YouTube or watched on television a show called The Masked Singer. And we can't actually sing songs on our YouTube videos because then we get pulled down for copyright issues. So we can't do that. But we can do something. So here's what's going to happen here in just a few seconds. We're going to change over, and you're going to get to watch a video. something called the Masked Dancer. And on the stage, I'm not going to be up anymore. Behind me, there is going to be one of our adult leaders is going to be in an outfit, dancing their face off for you in that outfit. And we need for you, after you've watched this, to Instagram message us at FuseFCC and tell us who you think this masked dancer is. And then next week, same time, next week, we're going to reveal to you who the masked dancer is, and we'll have another one for you as well. So, message us if you need a place to chat or a person to chat with. With that being said, let's see our masked dancer.